In 2024, Tatsuki Fujimoto is one of the biggest names in manga. After the runaway success of Chainsaw Man in the late 2010s and exploding even further into the spotlight and cultural zeitgeist with the anime release in 2022, Fujimoto has undeniably become one of the titans of the modern manga landscape. But we're not here to talk about Chainsaw Man, at least not directly. We're here to talk about a little one-shot done during a break between Chainsaw Man Part 1 and 2, a one-shot by the name of Look Back. You may be familiar with the name. There's an anime feature that's already out in Japan receiving wild acclaim, slated for Western release next month. Going into Look Back, I'm not sure what I expected from one of the most subversive, twisted, slightly unhinged, affectionate working mangaka today. But what I definitely wasn't expecting was such a soulful, somber meditation on art, creativity, relationships, the manga industry, and how personal tragedy can sometimes derail all of the above. Look Back is the story of one's personal relationships with the things they create and the people they create them with. It's a story about how someone can conflate creative output with self-worth, and is presumably a very autobiographical look at Fujimoto looking back at his own okay, that actually made me laugh. At his own place in the manga industry after, at time of publishing, years of weekly serialization. Fujimoto is a very interesting mangaka to me. I was reading Chainsaw Man weekly from about chapter 50 or 60 to the end of part 1, and I've read a fair share of Fire Punch, although I haven't finished it. What makes Fujimoto so unique is how brightly his interests, namely cinema, really shine through in the way that he creates. If anything else, his manga just feels cinematic, and not in the way that you can tell that he's clearly gunning for cool moments in anime adaptations, but in the way that feels like he's visually translating the Wong Kar-wai film in his head onto pen and paper. If we're going with filmmakers as an analogy, if other manga are infinitely polished Marvel movies, CGI tuned to perfection with endless resources behind them, Fujimoto is a grimy art house film that you see in an independent theater. An unknown quantity debut on a festival run, where the imperfections and budget constraints don't detract from the experience, but actually enhance it. Fujimoto's art is sketchy and rough compared to the classics of the medium, but I think that roughness really lends itself to the stories he wants to tell, especially when it comes time to convey devastatingly real human emotion, something that Fujimoto does better than maybe anyone doing it right now. So what is Look Back? Why should I read this? Well, dear viewer, you've come to the right place because we're going to get into why you should read Look Back. Look Back is the story of two girls aspiring to be manga artists in a relationship that lasts the majority of their lives. Ayumu Fujino runs a small manga strip in her elementary school newspaper, something she's infinitely lauded for. Her classmates look at her as a prodigy, and although her art is obviously childish and inexperienced, there's a sense of heart and storytelling to her jokes that's clearly evident, and everyone around her notices her for being the quote-unquote art kid. One day, Fujino is told that another artist's panels will also be featured in the paper. An enigmatic girl named Kiyomoto who no one has ever even seen. When Fujino sees Kiyomoto's art, she's stunned. Kiyomoto's art is far more advanced than Fujino's, with intensely beautiful drawings of still scenes that seem almost poetic in nature. Compared to Kiyomoto, Fujino doesn't even compare. For someone who's always been the artistic one of the school, Fujino's identity is immediately shattered. Fujino vows to become better than Kiyomoto, and over the next few years she studies art relentlessly. And although she improves by leaps and bounds, the mysterious Kiyomoto is also improving, with her backgrounds becoming dangerously professional. With no chance to ever compete with her unseen rival, Fujino quits art altogether. On the day of her elementary graduation, Fujino's teacher tasks her with delivering Kiyomoto's diploma. After all, with their shared newspaper page, Fujino is probably the closest thing Kiyomoto had to a proper classmate. Fujino makes the trip to Kiyomoto's place, only to realize that Kiyomoto is a hikikomori, a shut-in who doesn't leave her room. Outside of her room are countless sketchbooks lining the hallways, and in this instant we get the confirmation of something we only could have assumed till now. Kiyomoto wasn't just naturally gifted at drawing these landscapes, she was practicing consistently to get to that level, and that time that she wasn't going to school and interacting with others was probably time she spent honing her drawing skills. A lot of the time, envy toward creative talent is unjustified. Fujino envied Kiyomoto's perceived talent without taking into account the debilitating life circumstances that led her to God-given natural talent. Art, like anything creative, is 95% mileage, just putting in the work. And Fujino's small stack of sketchbooks that she throws away was nothing compared to Kiyomoto's literal hallway of filled sketchbooks. There's this moment of soft realization where it sinks into Fujino that her rival wasn't just someone who was better than her by chance. Kiyomoto was just working just as hard, if not harder, than she was. Unable to get a response from Kiyomoto from behind the door, Fujino does what she does best. She draws a funny, charming comic strip before realizing the whole thing is stupid and leaving. But as she turns to leave, she drops the comic, which slips under the door. Oh no. But as Fujino actually does leave, Kiyomoto builds up her courage and runs after her. As it turns out, Kiyomoto has always been a fan of Fujino's comics, proudly touting her as a manga genius. Kiyomoto looked at Fujino as the talented one and was trying to catch up to her, and she was devastated when Fujino stopped drawing. Fujino spins a quick lie that she's only been on the hiatus to begin working on a real, bona fide submission to a manga contest. After Kiyomoto asks her hero to sign the only thing she has on her at the time, her shirt, the two girls decide that maybe they can put their differences aside and team up to work on Fujino's manga submission together. Now, if you haven't read Look Back or seen the movie, I guess it's literally coming out right away, please go do that and then come back. The rest of this video will have spoilers, so you have been warned. Now, it's not hard here to see a bit of the duality between these characters, and it's also not hard to see that they're both presumably sides of Fujimoto himself. You know, Fujimoto. It's really not that subtle. Fujino represents storytelling, heart, comedy, and the innate, intangible quality that draws people to creative endeavors, even if technically they might not be perfect. Kiyomoto, on the other hand, is technical proficiency without anything to say. Beautiful, painstakingly detailed art that ultimately lacks palatability to a wider audience. It's through the marriage of these two sides of himself, his own art, and these characters, that we kind of get a deeper understanding of how Fujimoto views his own creative process. Over the years, Fujino and Kiyomoto work on manga together, becoming inseparable friends and creative partners. Fujino drawing the characters and Kiyomoto working on the backgrounds. They submit countless manga to magazines and are both heralded as young prodigies of the medium. After a bunch of one-shots, the girls are finally invited to work on their first serialization, Shark Kick. But there's a sadness about this meeting, as if Kiyomoto's heart isn't entirely there. On the walk back, Kiyomoto tells Fujino what we might have already suspected, that she wants to leave the partnership, declining to work on Shark Kick to go to art school. Even though she's shy and nervous, she wants to improve her art skills and get more comfortable around people. But this is met with nothing but hostility and negativity from Fujino, who sees this suggestion as an unacceptable betrayal to everything they've worked so hard to achieve together. Fujino leaves after saying some cutting half-truths and does Shark Kick on her own. The two never speak again. Shark Kick explodes in popularity, getting volume after volume, eventually even an anime adaptation. Fujino now lives in a beautiful modern apartment with an expensive digital setup. Despite that, we still see that she doesn't draw her own backgrounds. One day, as Fujino is working like usual, she casually glances at the TV and sees a news report. A sudden attack and mass murder at the nearby art school. Fujino's heart drops and she calls her old friend. No answer. She gets a call from her mother. She cries. Kiyomoto was the victim in this senseless act of violence. And despite what we see to the contrary, that a deranged man thought that Kiyomoto was copying his art, the culprit later admits that he would have done it anyway. The rest of the manga deals with Fujino's grief as she puts Shark Kick on indefinite hiatus. She returns to Kiyomoto's childhood home and regrets ever drawing the stupid comic strip that brought them together all those years ago. She imagines what she could have done differently. If they never met at all, she never would have pursued art again. She would have continued with karate and would have been able to save Kiyomoto with his surprise karate kick to the spine. Listen, man, it's Fujimoto. You knew there were going to be some goofs along the way. But all of this is just an escape from the devastating reality that Kiyomoto is gone. When suddenly a piece of paper flits from under the doorway, exactly as how Fujino's did all those years ago. Fujino looks at the comic. From Kiyomoto? She enters Kiyomoto's room, not sure what to even expect. It's not like Kiyomoto could still be alive and this was all just a mistake, a bad dream, only to find nothing. It's an empty room. But it's not empty. All around Kiyomoto's room are old manga strips, whole volumes of Shark Kick, and even the shirt signature from all those years ago. Despite everything, despite their falling out, Kiyomoto was always rooting for her friend. Fujino reflects on why she even makes manga to begin with in something anyone that makes things can relate to. Why even do it? Why make anything? What's the point? Creativity is hard, it's unglamorous, it's time-consuming. Sometimes nothing works the way you want it to. But at the end of all that painstaking work, there's always someone on the other side rooting for you. Someone's life that you made better with something only you could create. On the other side of all of it is a smile. Fujino stands up, steeling her resolve, and gets back to drawing. Look Back is a beautiful story about artists, life, the hardship of creative work. That even though making art is a labor of love, it's also hard, and there's real humans on both sides of it, artist and audience. It's a commentary on the manga industry by someone who is at once Fujino and Kiyomoto both feeling like a young, adulated prodigy and a relatively inexperienced newcomer to a brutal, cutthroat industry. It's also a story about how personal tragedy can sometimes freeze that very creativity in its tracks, and how a manga hiatus can often be a whole lot more devastating and personal to the artist than it is a slight on impatient fans. But maybe the biggest takeaway from Look Back is that you never know the effect that your art has on others. Fujino assumed Kiyomoto wanted to be her rival and take away her identity as the class's best artist. She had no idea that Kiyomoto looked up to her. She assumed Kiyomoto wanted to leave their partnership to pursue her own artistic endeavors, but really Kiyomoto just wanted to become a better artist so she could make their manga even better in the future for both of their sake. In some ways, Fujino did take Kiyomoto for granted, and it's a heartbreaking reality that they never got to mend their relationship. It's a story that's a painfully cute coming-of-age tale with a slice of comedy and supernatural weirdness that's typical for a Fujimoto manga, and even though it is a tragedy, there's a hopeful optimism to the end of this thing, where Fujino realizes why she creates in the first place, is to see the reactions on the faces of people that she makes the things for. Ultimately, I think it's a really good message and a really necessary one if you do create things. All in all, if it's not obvious, I strongly recommend Look Back. It's a manga that's at once beautifully minimalist and disarmingly real, with the passage of time often taking place wordlessly between panels and pages, only shown by the main characters drawing and hanging out. It's a manga with striking emotional beats, but that also doubles as a commentary on Fujimoto's own experience with drawing manga. But more than anything, I think it's a love letter to the art of making things, of pursuing creative endeavors even if you don't feel like it or immediately see the benefits. Because behind everything that you do make, there could be someone smiling on the other side. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Please subscribe, leave a like, and leave a comment, all that algorithm stuff if you want to help out the channel. It does really help me out personally. And if you'd like to support the channel, You can check out my Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. All of the VODs to my manga reading streams are up on Patreon, so you can get the entire backlog to those. We've read half of Delicious in Dungeon, almost all of which had Atelier, Look Back, and there's going to be way more to come. I would really appreciate it if you wanted to support, but if not, just leave a comment. What did you think of Look Back? Are you excited for the movie? Have you seen the movie? I know I'll be watching it in October as soon as I can. But thank you guys so much. I hope you liked the video, and until the next one.